Hit rates and historical probabilities from the Dynasty lens, that and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, Rashod Bateman is in the crosshairs here for us. Potential breakout player, but also one that has a questionable historical profile when you enter year two here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we got some questions we talk about hit rates and we talk about some of these things and kind of what we're talking about. I think for a guy like Bateman, he's a really interesting comparison because we could sort of look at him from a variety of perspectives coming into the NFL, based on his breakout in college and some of that data. You might say 60 or so percent, somewhere in that range would be what you would expect for him to hit. When I use the term hit, for a wide receiver or running back, I consider it a top 24 seasonal finish, right? You have to have, is it the best measure of anything? No, but you have to have something to shoot at, right? You have to have something to actually some sort of objective number. That's what I use. And then you can tinker it from there. But really looking at trying to accomplish that, I think after his rookie season, I'm pretty skeptical. And you take that number, his base rate has dropped down to 43%, which is guys with his experience in the NFL and pedigree, right? So he missed a year. He missed in year one, so he's going into year two as a first-round wide receiver. 43% of those guys have hit. I'm a little skeptical based on some of the stuff that he did on a route run basis. And you look at some of his projections and some of his productivity, 1.26 yards per route run. It's about 20% odds of future success. So that is of a future hit. So that's someplace that I'm a little skeptical on him based on where he has been productive, production-wise coming in. And I think it's constantly a moving needle of how much do you balance his profile coming into the NFL versus what he's done. And Jordan from 3, 4, 5 years ago would have been very strong on profile coming into the NFL. And I think more and more as we learn, right, more and more data that we get points to some really early indicators that we can position ourselves to exploit.
Yeah, I think especially now that Bateman, you can reset the clock to a good degree. I mean, I've seen him draw 103, 104, 105 straight ups, in that sort of environment. And you're talking potentially shifting to Drake London as a profile or Kenneth Walker as a profile. And I put him in buckets just to talk about my process a little bit. To round one guys, and just wide receivers in general, that top 45 or so, it's not a firm, 44 you're in, 47 you're out sort of thing, but right in that zone for year one puts you on a really strong hit rate track. And then the next bucket is top 80. So Bateman was in the top 80 adjusted points per game finish in year one. And yeah, I think you quoted 43%. I'm right at 44% for that just bucket of where did you finish and what was your pedigree in year one. And the biggest part is the density of what happens, that it's 0.8 average wide receiver one seasons from that bucket, 1.5 top 24 finishes. And that's a third of what it is if you're top 45. So if you were someone like Waddle, Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase from last year, you're in that top 45 bucket. And it becomes a 96% hit rate. A lot of them, again, are probably in year one. And so that's part of it. But 4.7 top 24 finishes, I mean, that's huge compared to 1.5, compared to 44%. So is
that number that you're using, just so I understand it, is that number of the guys that hit, they expect 4.7 hits? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah,
So I mean, we're talking super dense. And so when you combine the pedigree with a year one success track profile, and Bateman, the problem is you can see it from both sides. You can see it, well, they cleared the deck situationally. You're kind of looking at this stuff and you're saying, well, he wasn't a complete whiff. That's true. He falls in the ambiguous middle of close to a 50-50 probability-ish player. And that's really where it could go either way. But if you're telling me he's worth a top 5 rookie pick or equivalency, you have so much latitude in the marketplace. So I think Bateman is a perfect one to say that he's not on the success track. And that's one that it should be more about cost. And the cost right now, or the price, is relatively high, and it's moved up. And Marquise Brown exiting is part of that equation. But the wide receiver 1 is still there in Baltimore. So he has not left in Mark Andrews. And I think, to quote Jordan, 1,000 targets, 1,000,000 targets.
A gajillion. A
yeah.
lot.
What is the record? Let's add 1, and that will be Mark Andrews for this coming year. The data point I'm going to throw out for historical probabilities, it's going to be the top 16 quarterback threshold here. And I've been talking about this because Kenny Pickett, and just because of this class in general, the risk factors of we don't know how high these quarterbacks are going to go. And I've started to really put into buckets quarterbacks and be super picky with what I'm looking for at what price point, because the top 16 that in the first 3 years, the hit rate is well over 50%. If you are for the top 12, the hit rate, especially for the top 6, the impact in the first 3 years, the top 16 is 33%. 101 is 37%. These are big numbers. The rest of round 1, 8% in the first 3 years. I mean, that is a huge fall. And I know it sounds like an arbitrary, 1 through 16, 17 through 32, but think of it in NFL terms. NFL teams trade up for quarterbacks. And the guys that fade, the Picketts, we're fine. If you just want to let them drift to the late first, go for it. The guys the Lamar Jackson scenarios, the Aaron Rodgers scenarios, late first round or trading into the first round, I almost named all the hits. I almost finished. So we remember we could just hit like Aaron Rodgers. We can just hit like Dak Prescott. We can just hit like Kirk Cousins. Be super careful. We are naming almost all the outliers here.
Right.
So, I mean,
Cousins.
It really does. NFL teams trade up for the quarterbacks they actually think can impact their team. Otherwise, they've got big questions and they're just going to find value if they can or take shots. But for us, where we can be super picky, the top 16 is a major marker. And we can name Christian Ponder types out there and Jake Lockers, but their odds are so much better when you trade up into the top 10. They typically cost a lot in NFL terms, and we need to adhere to that. And it's also, to flip it around, the Josh Allen principle, right? If they fall, the Daniel Jones principle. If they fall and they're affordable, take a shot on them, even if you have some questions about them, because the NFL believed enough to draft them up there.
Totally. And I think you have to, and this goes back to, I think a lot of the reason for that is you look at guys that fall, there's a lot of information there, right? Guys that go early, we don't know a ton about, right? So if a team, I don't know, let's just hypothetically use the Giants drafts, I don't know, Daniel Jones and the top 8, right? It doesn't tell us what everyone else thinks, right? If Kenny Pickett slides to 20, that tells us what a lot of people think, right? That no one behind them was interested in trading up. None of the teams that passed on him, all the teams that passed on him, but all the teams that didn't trade up ahead, right? There's a lot more information there that we know from that fall. I think the point that you make really highlights that. So yeah, I think in really sort of understanding these numbers will allow you, and how they move too, right? How the initial number and then how to treat it once you see production, right? That's the thing that I think we hang on to, and that whether it's the quarterback thing or whether it's the Bateman thing, people are hanging on tight to their priors. The opinions
they move. I honestly think the year one move, and honestly, quarterback, it doesn't move a whole lot because guess what? They don't hit. But the running back and wide receiver movement, because that's typically where you do get some year one information about them, and not necessarily, this guy finished in the top 12, I guess he's good. Like that's low-hanging rudimentary stuff. We're talking about did they finish running back 20 or 50 or 100? Like this is stuff like what you're saying, moving priors is where are we? Where were we pre-draft, post-draft? And then year one, start to shade and adjust. And it doesn't mean a Keyshawn Vaughn goes to a 2%. That's not what we're talking about, but he may move behind or still be ahead of current rookies that you need to hang on to. Like you're not hanging on to priors enough with certain players, or, a Trey Sermon or whatever. And then you may be hanging on way too much to players that do drop to the floor. Day 3 guys that don't get off to a good track. I mean, dime a dozen. And frankly, shooting through a keyhole to try to find the guys that rebound from that.
Yeah. And then I think too, so I'm skeptical as a general rule on first round wide receivers, but I think that my experience with Ravens Twitter today, has shown me that we are very forgiving of the initial year failure, more so than we should be. And the exploitable part of that is you can use first round wide receivers as a savings, if you will, right? You can invest in one, especially if it's later on. I don't love to do this early in the first round, but later first into the second round, something like that. And you can almost always get out close to what you put in. Outside of some catastrophic event, you can almost always get out pretty close because people will do this forgiving approach, like we're seeing with Bateman, like my experience with Ravens Twitter today has been. And when you start looking at some of the numbers too, I mean, I was just comparing Bateman just because I had some thoughts on him, and we're seeing some people elevate him in terms of the vacated target thing. I mean, just look at the amount of routes that he ran and where he was actually targeted. 21.2% of the routes that Jamar Chase ran, he was targeted on. 23.8% of the routes Jalen Waddle. That's an elite number. 23.8% of those routes he was targeted on. 19.5 for Devonta Smith. Elijah Moore, 24%. Rashod Bateman, 15.9%. Big differences there, right? And so those are the things that I think the more and more we understand, the more and more we get data, it should really influence how we sort of react to these things, especially, and quarterback does take some time, right? So we're thinking now where a guy like Trevor Lawrence is, where a guy like Fields is, right? Sort of how do we look at that? There's a lot of uncertainty there and what those initial numbers mean, especially everyone's got a coaching change, right? Mac Jones, new offensive coordinator, Lawrence, Fields, right? Lance hasn't really played. So you're seeing, Zach Wilson's really the only guy that has the same situation. So you're sort of seeing those. And I think that position's a little bit harder. Wide receiver, I think it's super exploitable, and there's a lot of actionable numbers here, and there's a lot of signal that we can take really early on in a player's career.
Yeah, I love what you said about getting out after year one. I think that's something that's a lot more, you draft them and you're basically hunting for that success track. And then you're also hunting and saying, well, and I was thinking back to Jalen Reagor. Like
Yes.
let's say you get in for 109, 110, and you go, wide receiver 100 and something year one. You're like, that's not like, there's some N'Keal Harry risk here. So let's, like if you could still get out for a second, right? I mean, you still are in a position that you could flip that pick for a lot of things. You could add it to move up in the next year to get, some sort of cornerstone profile, reset the clock, but just get that asset re-insulated where we saw that people now at mid-20s roster size or maybe even later 20s just going to drop Jalen Reagor, look what happened. He got drafted over. And, you still have a quarterback question of what's going to happen here. At best, he's third or fourth in the rotation. They bring in A.J. Brown. I mean, everything has gone wrong. And part of that is that bomb second season that went as bad as the first season, basically. So, and that's the risk. The bottom could fall out, or you basically have half a round lower than what you spent initially. And that's a huge deal. That year two, as you said, no insulation, no training wheels. What's going to happen with the wide receiver? We need a big step forward. And if it does not happen to the tune of probably a top 50-ish season, I mean, Jerry Jeudy is the only one that gets passes because he's been drifting out, I think, around wide receiver 60 or something, 2 straight years. People still love him. Still awesome. So, but Jalen Reagor is a cautionary tale for you get in, don't get too sticky. Oh, year one, really not on the success track. He's going to be an outlier if he turns this around. So let me exit stage right and just figure something else out.
Yeah.
Just even if you just bank, it's a future pick, a future second. You just bank that and say, let me just move on. We know we're not going to hit on every pick, and we'll do our best. We'll recalibrate going forward. But there's a lot of risk, and those odds drop precipitously after that first one. I'm going to go with one other data point here for hit rates. And this is going to be the proven wide receiver. We talked about the proven quarterback, but let's talk about the guy. And you can say that there's no value in this profile, but there is. Because the guys I'm going to name, how about 74% is the number, which is the odds of at least another wide receiver one season. Not top 24, not top 40, top 12. Another wide receiver one season, as long as you have 2 in your back pocket. So the one hit wonder, again, still pretty good odds, but it doesn't beat 74%. So once you get a couple, the odds of any sequential number 3, number 4, number 5, you are a proven entity at wide receiver in the NFL. You have shown your talent for multiple seasons when the league, the defenses saw you coming. And this is good news for, I mean, again, Cooper Kupp has a couple. That shouldn't surprise anybody. No one's really banking on him to not succeed pretty much for another one at this point. Justin Jefferson, he's 2 for 2. So he's pretty much the oracle.
Right.
So 2 seasons, 2 wide receiver ones. Few people are questioning him. But here are the 2 interesting ones. And one of them I really like. Chris Godwin. I think he's the perfect blend. Some people don't believe in him. I think 2 of the last 3 seasons for him, he got a little bit of a slow start. 2 of the last 3, I think top 8, not even top 12. And he's coming off an injury. He's accessible for like mid to later firsts, which I think is pretty good when you say he's not old, but he's not young. He's right in that middle zone of he's produced. He's 26. And I've been picking up more shares this offseason of him in trades than I have in earlier in his career at all. Part of it was he was a one-hit wonder up until this point, or this first 3 years or so in the NFL. He's got to prove it to me. He's got to earn it. So I really like this 25, 26, 27-year-old zone for wide receiver. So Chris Godwin is one. The other one, Juju Smith-Schuster, of these active guys that, are right in this window here of playing at least 4 or 5 seasons. And Juju Smith-Schuster, I have a little more question than Chris Godwin, but he's got an ideal situation here. And I would just say, don't be surprised. Kansas City, the Mahomes effect, and a pretty ambiguous depth chart now without Tyreek Hill. So he's right there. He is right there when you say this could be schemed up. It could be like playing Robin to the Batman of Antonio Brown, where Juju produced earlier in his career. So he's a really interesting one. I have a lot more confidence in Chris Godwin, but 74% odds. This is pretty much the most bankable. And if you have to go a little older, so be it. But get the guy that's done it at least twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's all the names, right? And this is why be skeptical on the wide receiver, the youth wide receiver movement, because we know where the dense hits are, right? We know where the dense hits are. It's just the guys that have already done it, right? Because it's very difficult to be a high volume target guy, right? That's the dirty little secret is it's very difficult to get to a high number of targets, and it takes time and it takes a lot of skill, and the difference between being good and great is big. And once you see guys be great, just sort of believe in the greatness there. So that's I'm with you. And I mean, we have a lot of guys sort of in that range. Juju's a really interesting one, and Godwin is as well. I like Godwin as a buy.
And yeah, just to provide some transparency, that the giant, I call it the indices, for each of the skill positions. So what I track is adjusted points per game. So it's a little different than points per game. It penalizes for when you miss games to certain thresholds, it drops you a little bit. But it looks at adjusted points per game as that number. And then the other part is at quarterback, for example, you have to have logged a top 50 season. It's pretty easy to do so. I mean, even if you see a few relief appearances look at that. I mean, that's more than half the league's starters and backups included. So that's a pretty easy threshold. I know I'm leaving out occasional overt busts, like they play a year or two. They're in the NFL, quote unquote, but then so I know I'm leaving a few random people out, but it's a much simpler system when I was loading and creating this database. Wide receiver and running back, top 150 season. Again, basically you see a target or two and you get a few carries, you're in the system for that year. And you just need one in your entire career, and then I'm tracking you forever. So that's the threshold. I think it's top 100 for tight ends. So again, very, very loose thresholds to get in there, and it's adjusted points per game. And then the hits, like Jordan said, it's top 24, and then it's top 12, top 6, different thresholds there for tight end and quarterback. So you're looking upper end in terms of auto start guys, and you're looking at secondary starters with that back half of those tracking thresholds. Anything different or what you would highlight in terms of your processing when we reference these numbers in the future?
No, I mean, I treat the quarterback number that I would reference as a top 12. And then if I use a tight end as well, it'd be top 12. If I use a top half hit, which would be something else that I typically would say. I'm thinking about basically cutting the hit number in half. So top 6 for a quarterback or a tight end, top 12 seasonal finish for a running back or a wide receiver.
Yep. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 106 of the Football Guys Dynasty Trail. 107 transparency there. Do want to remind you about the merch store over there at Football Guys, the official gear with that classic Black-Eyed Joe logo. Shop.footballguys.com. Hats, shirts, outerwear, coffee cups, and more. We're also getting suggestions from the Football Guys staff. Things are being added or in the works through the coming months here, seeing what people like, but quality designed and materials. And a reminder for the show here, thanks so much for subscribing, finding us on the new platform. You can watch us live on Tuesday nights, but also most of the traction there is on the audio podcasting side. So thanks so much in the transition over the past few months to getting our own feed over on all of your podcasting platforms of choice. So let's get to some dynasty trading here. And Jordan, when I put this together, I usually put it together a few days in advance. And when I saw this Justin Jefferson one, I had to ask you, I'm like, this is going to be one of the, because frankly, we had the Mahomes threshold and now we have the Justin Jefferson threshold of, did you get enough? And the profile versus just getting a ton of toys. So this is one quarterback, 2 tight ends, talk about a rarity, and it's 12 keeper. So I kind of view this as FFPC like in the depth. And this is trading Justin Jefferson for 4 first rounders next year, Jordan. 4, 2 seconds, a 24 first, and Miles Sanders. Talk about getting your guy. But it is 12 player keeper. So it's some blend between redraft and dynasty here, but you can have Jefferson forever. So what are your thoughts on those assets?
It's a terrible deal. You can't trade that much for a single player. That's not a quarterback and super flex or 2 quarterback leagues. You just can't do it. I think it's
where's the line?
Somewhere short of 5.
3 in Sanders.
I don't love. I mean, what do you
just wouldn't do
my
it?
question is why are you doing it?
Because they're really good, I guess.
Why are you doing it? Well, it's not going to give you an edge. Right? Like it's not to like, and I love Justin Jefferson. He's great, but the edge that he's going to get over a guy like Mike Evans this year, or
which costs 1 first,
right?
Keep going.
Like a half a win, maybe.
Chris Godwin with another
assuming
first.
A nuclear season out of Jefferson and a pedestrian one out of Mike Evans, which honestly, if you put them together, like it's probably closer to a coin flip who finishes higher this year. So listen, it takes, I know it's really awesome to be able to post that you have Justin Jefferson on your team on Twitter in June. It's awesome. But this misses the mark big time. And I'll give you and we've done this, by the way, in our FFPC league. When you treat future first, especially in a keeper, like I'm in a 7-team keeper, or excuse me, a 7-player keeper, having future first is actually like, is like jet fuel. Because what you're doing is if you get a high one and you're good, you're basically adding another keeper, right? And if that player is good, right? If it's a Breece Hall, right? If I have 101 in a league where I have 7 keepers and I'm going to add Breece Hall at that back end of the season can actually compete and play and hopefully sort of elevate my team. That's an asset in that. Having that stockpiled, right? If you get a shot at 2 2023 running backs in this format, that can really jump your team quickly, right? And so that's an edge there I think you're giving away. And I don't like this at all.
Well, and just even if you're projecting, say 3-4 more wide receiver 1 seasons for Jefferson, you can arbitrage that with these picks relatively easy. I mean, if you trade 1 for Mike Evans, does he give you 1 or 2? If you can trade 2 for, just pick young wide receiver X, then now you've only traded 3 of them. You still have 2 others and some seconds, which have extra value when you're filling out the rest of your roster and it's only 12 keeper. There's going to be some guys that slide through or be tough cuts because that's only 140 something players. So those as assets, 5 first, we've talked about it before. You would have to get because it's annual team building. In these types of formats, you're re-sculpting your team on an annual basis. And if Jefferson's a 2-warp player, I mean, that means from each of those firsts, you only have to get half a win. And via trading, you can do that. I mean, relatively easily if you're just specific about what you're looking for.
Right.
All right, let's go to J.K. Dobbins, one of your favorites, Jordan. Mr. J.K. Dobbins in 12-team Superflex traded for Miles Sanders and a 23 first.
I dig this deal. I dig the Sanders in the first side because I find it really hard to see how Dobbins is massively better than a Sanders type profile, right? How taking the Sanders side in this deal and the pick burns you, right? I don't think J.K. Dobbins has enough ceiling to burn you. And that would sort of be my angle on this. And then here's the other trick too is, right, if you do this deal and we have reasons to be concerned about Dobbins in particular with some of the injury stuff, right? They brought in Mike Davis, right? We've talked about some reasons why to be a little bit concerned about the return of Dobbins. And he has ceiling questions and concerns anyways, beyond just his injury stuff. All that said, right, you can trade less than the first for maybe Zeke, for Connor, for Fournette, right? For a bunch of players that probably have a higher floor ceiling combination than J.K. Dobbins does. And so that would be my pitch on this is take the pick and then listen, if you need to backfill a J.K. Dobbins hole, fill it with somebody else. But I don't mind taking the shot with Sanders. I don't mind taking it all. It's a good job. Yeah. That's a good job.
You're arbitraging two guys that were still waiting to kind of do it, right?
Uh-huh.
So 2 second-round guys that Dobbins, again, I thought Dobbins flashed a lot. Now, his talent versus the situation and what's actually going to occur and coming back from injury, and like you said, some of the optics there of, well, they bring in Mike Davis. Why would you do that? Well, you have to have a question about Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins, or you wouldn't do it, pretty much. So, and Sanders is like the punching bag. Like no one thinks he's going to do anything. But yet he's shown something in the NFL. Now he may not, but is it largely a different situation than Baltimore? Maybe some committee that you want to be less of a committee, but it actually is. And you've got a mobile quarterback that siphons some away. So, I mean, you're kind of arbitraging your way to a first. And here's the thing. If you whiff on Sanders, he finishes running back 37 this year. Dobbins is top 15. You still have the backstop of the first.
Right.
To win the deal. Win the deal outright. Make it even. Just recoup and reload next year with that 23 first if it doesn't work out. And if Dobbins isn't, I mean, you have Dobbins side can lose this massively. You can lose it both ways.
Yep.
Sanders is actually better than him this year.
Yep.
Dobbins turns into Sanders by January in terms of appeal. And then, because you've got, 3 years, Dobbins hasn't really achieved standard in any of the three. One was he was hurt. That's assuming he stays healthy this year. And then you have a first on the other side. And Miles Sanders, who could be going to a better situation or just an organization that trusts him more or views him more as a feature back or pays him more to be a feature back.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you a question. Where would you, and in terms of expected points per game out of the running back position for the Baltimore Ravens, where would you expect that they ranked last year?
Of the 32 teams?
Of the 32 teams.
I'll go somewhere in the mid-20s. If I was going off of if I was just roughly thinking about high leverage opportunity score and stuff like that. So yeah.
30th.
30th, yeah.
And I think that would shock a lot of people.
Well, they don't get a lot of goal line and they don't get a lot of targets.
Right.
And those
26
2 ways
in
to
terms
pay.
of actual points scored.
Pay bills.
That's not necessarily the greatest situation. Some other ones that I found were
not exactly 2015 Latavius Murray they were dealing with.
Right. So yeah, and that's one that I would be a little bit skeptical of.
And Dobbins apparently, people view it as Dobbins is just going to lift the lid here. That he's so good, they're going to change everything DNA wise we've seen under the Lamar Jackson era.
Is he's going to throw to running backs more? Right, they're going to run more routes.
Apparently,
right? That's what they would need to have happen. And it's not even that he doesn't throw to running backs. They don't run routes for running backs.
We need. Who do you think is going to catch more passes, Dobbins or Akers?
I think there's a decent shot that's Akers, right? I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like people think people think Akers is not going to catch passes, right. But you know what? You should be at least as skeptical of Dobbins and the Ravens.
Yeah,
that was the point.
Yeah, that would be.
I think Akers can Stafford his way to 30. so I'm at least giving tiebreakers to the quarterback, and not even tiebreakers, tier shifting breakers here.
Yeah.
All right. I think we talked about this topic before, but let's dig in. We've got FFPC 1 quarterback trading a 23 first for Justin Herbert and a second next year.
By the way, the Rams 0.84 routes per dropback for running back, and Baltimore 0.66. So a massive, massive difference in terms of expectation out of the passing game on a per dropback basis there for the running back. You asked me the Herbert one, right? Sorry, I was reading that stat and trying to practice what I was going to say. You asked me the Herbert question. With the Herbert situation, again, I really like him. This is the problem with sort of elite quarterbacks and start 1 quarterback, right? It's tough to return a first. I'm interested to see how you can sort of go ahead and arbitrage that and try and recoup some of that production. And again, if you have one of the things that I like in this, if you can trade them, right? If there's a market to do this, you can consistently get cheap quarterbacks in drafts and the like, right? Constantly flip them over. It's tough in FFPC to hold a bunch of them, but if you're looking at quarterbacks, 3rd round of rookie drafts, for example, 1st round quarterbacks tend to beat the expectation there. So that's one thing that you can sort of shoot for again. And then when you get the opportunity to do it, you kind of have to do it because there's a limited market for it. So, I don't know. I would be interested. Is this one team-based a little bit for you? Because that was kind of the way that I looked at this. I'm like, I want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're quote unquote dying at quarterback, that's really hard in FFPC. I mean, I would guess like minimum, you probably have like a Cousins option. Minimum, like even if you're not a Cousins fan, that's probably the minimum truly accessible. And so to give up a first, I know it's first to second, and yeah, that could be 110 to 202, but you can't assume that going into the deal. FFPC is a randomized universe of what those picks turn into. So I think if you have 2 strong quarterbacks, you have to kind of sell for these types of things. You have to do this just because you clear the roster spot and you go, well, I've got Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert. Well, if Rodgers returns like a second and you can do this with Herbert, I think you have to do this, because this gives you big upside with what that pick could turn into. That even if it's a later first, that still is appealing. You can flip that for a future first, keep doing it till you get a high first. Like you still can do things like that. And Aaron Rodgers at his age is not going to be super sellable, but yet super startable. So I think if you have 2 strong quarterbacks, who's the most sellable? And then you probably do that. Or if they're similar, you keep the Josh Allen of them, or you keep the Mahomes of them, or whatever, but you figure out a way to sell the Lamar Jackson version or your QB2 or 1B. And then I think if you're buying, I just typically in a 1 quarterback try to do less than this and not give firsts, and like, who's the best quarterback I can get that's an upgrade that I'm giving a second. Like I usually try to do that stuff, or flip from another position of strength instead of the first. Like, can I give my running back 4 or my wide receiver 4 and do that in my second for Herbert or something? Like, so those are my suggestions for doing it if you're the buyer. But the seller, I think with multiple strong quarterbacks, you draft best player and then you end up with 2 or 3 strong quarterbacks. You got to figure out exits. And sometimes it's specific to the player in the market most sellable.
Yeah. I mean, Brady for a second, right? That's an easy one. I think, Brady for Daniel Jones and Naheem Hines in the past week. I mean, that's dirt cheap, and you're basically right. You're accomplishing it, and you're getting that asset. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
All right, last one, and this is like the Jefferson one. I've been waiting to ask you for about 48 hours. Super flex and 2 PPR for tight end. So we are starting 1, but it's 2 PPR. So we're going pretty much as high as scoring as we can realistically go. Dak Prescott for Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, this is the right. In the startup draft, this is the right type of range. This is the right. This is the zone of which you'd be debating. One of the things that, and if you look actually in the tight end premium formats here, he's actually going. Pitts is going ahead of Dak in startup drafts. It's by a couple spots, so it's the right range. I think a lot of this is team and roster construction. For me, I think it's it's more difficult to get after a quarterback, and it's more difficult to trade for an elite quarterback without an elite quarterback, right? And I think some of the Andrews stuff has taught us some stuff. I think that we know a little bit more about tight end profiles than maybe we did a couple of years ago, and that might change the arc of this a little bit. I find myself building better teams by going quarterback at the top spot on my roster in Superflex because of the opportunity cost, right? I would rather go Dak and Kittle than in the third round, right? And that's been something that I've been able to do, than to go Pitts and right Jalen Hurts, right? Because that construct is, I think, a better construct and a more sturdy construct going to the quarterback early. So I think this is the right debate. I've seen people go the other way, obviously. I would go quarterback here because I think it is something that's rarer and it's tougher to sort of maneuver in if you don't have a guy that is elite or close to elite.
Yeah, I think one thing I'll add about your specific league marketplace will be how tough are the other tight ends to acquire? Because not saying they have the trajectory and obviously the longevity factor of a 22-year-old Kyle Pitts after 1 year success track, like huge Hall of Fame expectations. So obviously that could go wrong, that could go right. And he could be quasi untouchable in premium formats for 5+ years. So we could be going there, but we're one data point in. And I just look at profiles like Darren Waller, Travis Kelce is getting to that point, that I'm not saying it lasts as long, but they have been there, done that for longer than Pitts, and they would be easily more affordable than this. I would still remind folks it's a start one. Mm-hmm. So can you, I would say, know your trade market. I mean, our tight ends gold and they're untouchable and you just can't get them. And there's leagues that maybe the format doesn't warrant that, but that's how it feels in the market, the have and have nots. That and the other part is quarterback could be wildly accessible with trying to replicate Dak Prescott, which is hard, but it also could be one where you say there's 6, 7, 8 guys. I want 2 of them and I don't want to worry about stuff. And if you have that, you go, well, I can load up. And what if Pitts ever gets hurt or he has a down year? And I know touchdown regression, he technically, by that measure, he had a down year last year, but there will be a moment for Kyle Pitts. And you can't get stuck on one player, 1 year, 1 June. I got to get him. Like you got to look for opportunities. And I know 21, 22 years old, you think there never will be one.
There will be.
There will be. For almost every player, they become Patrick Mahomes, right? For 2 years, we talked about it was the standard threshold of he's just not gettable. Is this enough to trade him? But yet, you know what? Here we sit. He's gettable. Patrick Mahomes right now is gettable. And we've been talking for years that he hasn't been. So to assume in 2023 or 2024 or 2025, you're not going to have the opportunity to get Kyle Pitts, that assumes everything goes perfectly. So again, I think I would take my chances and say, can I trade my QB3 for Waller or Kelce? And let's see how long that lasts. It's a 1 tight end at the end of the game is what I would say. If this is 2 tight end, I'm singing a completely different tune. The thresholds change everything. So
correct.
And Pitts is worth, I can argue for him as the 101 in a 2 tight end format, insulation factor. And if you start up in the scoring too, it just gets pretty crazy when you think about formats in that fashion, when you start running baselines and positional values and all the things that I kind of do for player value. It's amazing to see what happens with tight end. Well, scoring is part of it, but when you go 2 tight end plus something else, it just goes nuclear.
Yeah, and I was just looking at our projections. For example, we have Pitts and Ertz, for example, are really close in terms of receptions. It's a couple of, I think it's 6 advantage for Pitts, so that's going to juice him up a little bit. But it's it's a little over a 2 point per game difference. Right.
Again, you can replicate. You can replicate and say, right. Yeah, let's bank Dak. Let's not go down that rabbit hole of Mike, if this is your QB1 Now everyone moves up a spot. It's not really a good situation. If he's your QB2, you're crushing it right now. And now you're making yourself, maybe you got some, Jameis Winston, Matt Ryan sort of committee that who knows where that goes. Right. And you may be in the desert fishing for water, squeezing cactus, and trying to fix things when really you had the solution in-house previously and got a little cutesy there.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just look at that mid-range, like if Pitts isn't like, when we project a significant tier break after Kelsey and Andrews, and if that's right, Pitts is overvalued because you're going to be chasing.
Well, you're paying for age, right? You're paying for the age factor.
Yeah.
And as much as people want Pitts to be the oracle and he's going to be the greatest and he's going to lap the whole position for half a decade, that sounds great. But you actually have to start logging the tight end 1, then tight end 3, then tight end 2, like over and over again. You just have to, like Kelsey, we've had runs for these tight ends in a 2 to 4 year span where they become that guy, that impact player that is lapping the position. And he's just, good luck. Come at me. It's the starting lineup theory. Come at me, bro. Like, it's just really tough when you're going against those teams and you don't have the other lightsaber. You don't have the weaponry to go against that in terms of the position. So Pitts is not there. Pitts was on the good success track, but he needs to up it. And he still has all that competition, those 3, 4, 5 guys that have been there, done that. He has to actually go over those guys. It's not just, hit 14 points per game and you're fine. No, he still needs to beat those others for the positional ranking and the impact. We've got a couple quotes from the Dynasty Forum this week. One of them related to that Justin Jefferson massive deal. A lot of discussion about picks versus what the threshold is. I thought this was pretty apropos, and you probably have some iteration of this line, which is for 3 2023 firsts, you can have any player on my roster, 4 firsts, and I'll throw in my favorite chef's knife, add in the rest, and I'll throw a game for you in season.
It's awesome.
There you go. 3, awesome. 4, and 5.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's once you start dealing with multiple, like 3 first is a lot of picks. And even
the problem is you assume they're late, right? Oh, well, I traded 3, 4 first for auto start player X. Right. Sounds great. But you're assuming that especially if it's 3 different years or spread out over multiple years, as we've talked about before, the variables of, well, I'm good now. Well, what happens in December 2023? You good then? That's when if it turns early, it could be a train wreck deal.
Yeah. That is you get doing that, and again, you take on those picks, but again, you can then spread it out, right? You can trade one of those picks for Fournette plus, right? Like you start doing that on your roster, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm ahead, sort of breaking it apart. And again, it becomes a what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to have a sexy roster? Are you trying to have an effective one? There's a difference there. And I think a lot of Dynasty comes down to what are you trying to accomplish? Because we know less than, the main reason why people play, less than half of them say it's to win, right? So there's other stuff going on that I think you and I play to win, and we try and help people win.
Oh, I should go over and check in the Shark Pool forum, because I actually put a dynasty trade and I said prettiest roster in the offseason versus winning a title, and I wanted to see the comments on who won. So as we go through closing the show, I'll see if I can track that down, see if we got some responses there. Do you have a chef's knife? Do you have anything that is legit commercial quality in the kitchen? Do you have anything that sort of sets you apart, or are you just like, I'll use anything, I don't really care?
I have some. I wouldn't consider it a chef's knife, but I have like some ceramic knives and stuff like that work. Okay. I wouldn't consider. I'm not of a chef quality, but I worked in restaurants and stuff and stole ideas from people, so it was good.
Okay, you're not gonna be surprised by this because it's ultimate efficiency. But
what is it that cuts avocados in your house? That's what I
know. When we started traveling around, I literally got a singular quote unquote cutting knife for 97 cents at Walmart. I've had it this whole time. Still cuts great. Does it take the rind off of citrus fruit for my smoothies? That's the main thing it needs to do, and it still cuts. But yeah, like it's not a set or anything. I have used good knives. They're really heavy, and I know that's probably a good quality. And I know if you're chopping for 20 minutes and preparing in-depth stuff, I'm sure it's a huge benefit. The weight, they always say that in the handle, or like, what is it? There's like part of the chef's quiz is probably there's 7 parts to a knife. Name them all.
Right.
So some little trivia like that. The blade. Like, yeah, that's 1 out of 7. You're a genius.
Yeah.
All right, we got one more here.
We got a nice set for my wedding, and so my wife and I, we went to St. Lucia for our honeymoon. Came back. This is, we've been married almost 6 years. Came back. I was like, I'll make dinner. It was actually the first night of the football season, and so we came back, and it was actually right when you and I started to get to know each other. And so it's the Thursday night, first game of the season, and I'm in the kitchen, and I cut with a ceramic knife that had been used like twice. I basically cut off the tip of my finger. Like, to this day, when it's cold out, the nerve pain really is bad. And my finger was hanging there, and I was like, she's like, we got to go to the hospital. I was like, I am not missing kickoff of the NFL season because I just cut the tip of my finger off. So be careful with your knives.
Did you say at that moment, you're like, that was a really clean cut though? I mean, look at that. Like, did you, like, in the moment, did you have some sort of comic?
It was one of those things where no matter how hard I squeezed it, and all the things that they teach you in like first aid about squeeze it, elevate it, ice, all that stuff, I was pouring blood. Like, I would have a towel on it, release the towel. We were trying to take a picture because she had a friend works in an ER, and we couldn't get a picture without blood just pouring
obscuring the actual cut. Well, so did you leave? Like, that was a ton of stitches, right?
No, I didn't. It didn't get stitched up. I never.
So you stayed at home and you just squeezed it all night.
Stayed at home. I squeezed, and my wife's like, "Why are you laying on the floor above your head?" Because I paid attention in health class. That's why.
You're like I'm watching Mahomes. No, that was 6 years ago. No, it wouldn't have been him.
Right.
I don't know who that would have been. I had a story like that where I probably should have gone to the ER or, done something more. So we were in this phase where they got the milk in the glass bottles, like from farmer's market, or I can't remember where we got it. So I was in the kitchen, and it was tight, and it was dark, and we had dark countertops, and I put it down, and it wasn't on the whole thing, and it slipped off. Half of it, I guess, was off the counter when I dropped it. And so this was 2/3 full or whatever. So it drops. I'm barefoot with shorts.
Oh no.
So it drops, it shatters. It's like shrapnel. And I just look down. First of all, milk everywhere. Second part though, is my legs are cut. Like, and specifically there was one spot. So one big piece of thick glass got me. I don't know if it's on the way down or bouncing and then up and then down again, but it was a big chunk. I still have a pretty big scar in my shin. And it was like, so here was the situation, because, okay, A, it's a mess. B, you can't, like, I swear I didn't move for 15 minutes minimum. It's just like, honey, I need help.
Yeah.
I made a mess. not just in the, so cleaning, but also assessing, like, when your whole front of your leg is bloody, you don't really know, like, am I cut 9 times, once? I mean, am I cut somewhere else and the blood just happens to be there? So it was just such a, and yeah, I mean, I got assessed like later on, like I think it was a day or two later, of like, yeah, you should have got stitches. Yeah, that would heal and would have healed better. But man, it didn't stop for a while. And it was just like the cleanup of just like, I got cramps, I think, just standing and crouching and just not moving with glass everywhere around me. It was mess.
Yeah, wait, this milk wasn't strawberry when I dropped it. Why is it all red?
Yeah, exactly.
Pouring blood everywhere.
The Red Sea down there. All right, we got the last one here. A 4th round backup running back is underwhelming as a 202 selection, so rookie draft wise. But I actually like Isaiah Spiller there as a safe stash that you could gain steady value following an A.J. Dillon-like trajectory. Isaiah Spiller is an interesting case, Jordan.
Yeah. Listen, he's an injury away guy, and I think you take guys that went on day 2 ahead of guys that go on day 3, right? And I think that that's a general rule that will double your hit rate. And I think, listen, I think we get too cute a lot of times. And if you just do that, right, and if you just make that a rule and say, I'm just not smarter than the historical numbers in terms of picking between them, I'm just going to repeatedly do this, you would have come out way ahead historically. And so I can't pass on guys like Rashod White. I can't pass on Brian Robinson. I can't pass on Ty Davis-Price, even though I like Spiller. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is we can really like a player profile, but we have to adjust when we get more information, whether that's rookie season production or that's what the NFL tells us, right? When you see a player drop, there was a chance that Spiller could have been up in the top 2 running backs taken. He's not. We have to adjust to that. Okay, you have to adjust to that. And this taking him at 202, again, I like the injury away type spot, but I can't at that price take him over the guys that I'd be required to take him over.
To circle back, we started on hit rates and historical numbers, and let's close on this, because top 12 chances for top 12 finish for a running back. Round 3, 27% in the first 3 years. Round 4, 5%. There's a clear line. Allegiance.
Take the big number.
Exactly. So day 3, that's a huge, a mile marker here. That if you're running back watching, round 3, you're fine. Round 4, you've got to calibrate. And frankly, I think the line is, if you pay a 3rd round rookie pick, that's palatable. If you like the profile, you like the guy. The problem is Spiller's not going there. He's not even in the same continent as going in round 3. But yet you've got day 2 guys like Brian Robinson, fading well beyond him. You've got Tyrion Davis-Price. We have a historical, Alexander Madison was a good example. And I love what you said about just, you're playing the market. And you may think that Spiller's better than some of these other expected to be backup running backs. But we've seen, how about Joshua Kelly? Round 4? Oh yeah. He's the best backup there. Really? Well, you still got to win. And again, I like Spiller better. But the point is, though, they're not guaranteed anything.
Right.
And so they've got to go in there, earn it, win it. And you're still talking about a guy that needs Eckler out of the way.
Right.
The odds of him being top 24 or really lineup relevant and centric with Eckler still there is minimal.
Right.
Minimal with him healthy. So that is a huge marker for the hit rates. And you know what? It's not any better. The ratios, they're slightly better. Round 3 for top 24 for running backs. 41% in the first 3 years, 17% for running back. For round 4, you're on the wrong side here.
Yes.
So I was one of the biggest Spiller fans out there, but the more we saw expected draft position in March and April, and it's like, this is trending. He's right on he was like in the 90s, or like he was right in that late 3rd, early 4th, and he went the wrong way. He went the wrong way. And the Chargers might have had a round 3 grade on him, but the point is they didn't have a round 1 grade on him because they would have drafted him earlier. So there's big risk here. And in August, there's going to be cheap backup running backs that are available for waiver wire dollars or a 4th round pick or whatever. And you're going to say, well, I got to get Spiller at 202. He's just going too high. I've seen him go ahead of Jahan Dotson, for goodness sake. That makes your brain explode.
Right. Yeah.
In terms of historical probabilities. You just can't do it. You can't do it. I don't care if you went to Texas A&M. I don't care if Isaiah Spiller was your neighbor when you were growing up. You just can't do some of these things. It's the process part. It's the probabilities part. And I'm not saying you can't have any ownership, any exposure to Spiller. I've had situations where I've had 2, 3, 4 second round picks, and I can make an exception and have an ownership here or there of Isaiah Spiller in that particular league. But you need the rare occasion, or you drafted him as a Devy. You can't just go straight up and just go, early second every league, boom, Isaiah Spiller. That is pretty bad process.
Yeah, and Reed puts in the chat, so you're saying the guy that took Spiller at 106 in one of my rookie drafts probably made a mistake, yes. And just to piggyback off of what you said, I just look straight round and straight accomplishment. 30% of round 3 running backs hit for 2 top 24 seasonal finishes in their career, 12% for round 4. Massive difference. You can't make that bet.
That was for top 24.
Yeah, 15% of round 3 guys make 2 top 12 seasonal finishes. 6% for round 4. So again, it's a smaller number because it's just a really hard accomplishment to get. But again, you're more than doubling your odds by taking the round 3 guy.
Right. And when you're 2, 3, 4X, you can't. Yeah. I mean, again, you can shade, you can color a little bit outside the lines.
Yeah.
If it's close, or again, Spiller, I really think the trigger is Spiller needs to be going later. That's the real movement here thing. He's going ahead of Rashod White. He's going ahead of Brian Robinson. He's going ahead of Tyrion Davis-Price. And I think a big part of it is people just see this open runway. Oh, running back 2 is his. That's it. It's his for 3-4 years. He's going to be the heir apparent to Austin Eckler. These scenarios that you dream up. I mean, if Spiller gets hurt, what happens? Do they draft over him? And also, we didn't even get in. What's the I don't know if I can pull it up really quick, but the competition rate, right? So I didn't even pull that into the equation. All right, so here we go. So it's basically 50-50. Round 4 running backs are basically 50-50. The next offseason, not the free agency, the draft. That they draft an early day 3 or higher guy next year. So you don't think there's pressure on Spiller right now for him to be viewed as the clear number 2 back on that depth chart, or they're diving back in again next year.
Plus, you have to take into factor what the veteran marketplace at this point could be. Guys that could be potential cut candidates here in the next. And I did an article on potential cut candidates and potential free agents. Zeke, Mixon, Delvin Cook, Fournette, Derrick Henry, all guys that their contracts could be potentially cuttable. Guys that are free agents: Barkley, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, Damian Harris, Josh Jacobs. Right, you're looking at all guys
and next year's rookie class. Yeah,
right. It's a horrible time to be a running back right now because there's so much competition.
That's why if you have day 2 pedigree, you've got some allegiance. You've got a much better. I mean, that survival rate after the first year for round 3. So let's talk about Tyrion Davis-Price. Let's talk about Brian Robinson. 79%. Much better number, much safer number. So, I mean, their odds are higher to survive 2 off seasons than it is for 1 off season for Isaiah Spiller.
Right.
So, yeah, you talked about veterans, you talked about the rookies, and man, just surviving 12 months. It's tough stuff. So, and the real part is, I mean, early second. That's the part that gets me. You can't take the bait. The Dameon Pierce. It's the Dameon Pierce theory here. Spiller just happens to be a bigger name pre-draft and a bigger name when he was going through college.
Yes.
All right. Covered a lot. In this episode, we discussed about hit rates, explained our process a little bit when you hear it in future episodes, closed on that as well. Talked a little bit about arbitrage, J.K. Dobbins, Justin Jefferson, paying a truckload for players in general, and one quarterback plays there like Justin Herbert, and what to do potentially with multiple premiums at different positions.
Hey, quick trivia question I have for you. What's the average round 4 running back? How many carries do they get in the first year of their career in the rookie
56
season? Close.
Ooh.
72.5.
Wow. 72. That's not going to be. Hopefully they're only in 3 games. You get 25 per 3 games. I'm sure that's how it works. No, you get 4 per.
Yeah.
3 per. Yeah. Wow. There you go. 70 something. So that's what you're buying into. The average outcome there. If he's above average, maybe he'll get about 81, 82. All right. Closing up shop here. I am Chad Parsons. He's Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.
Fake hoop.